Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PT. Christina Prevett. I am one of the little bit about grief. This is kind of a personal conversation, but it's also one that I think is really important when we are working with older adults. So personally, I've kind of been speaking a little bit on my social media. I lost my godmother. She was my aunt. She was in my top 10 list of favorite people. And she who had battled cancer a long time ago. They found out a couple of weeks ago that she had metastases in her brain. And her first radiation, she didn't do very well. And it was devastating. I'm still not okay. It made me think a lot about grief. So I am 34 years old. And over the last 2.5 years, I have lost three people that are really close to me. I lost my grandmother who I was really close to. And as I was reflecting on this most recent loss, which my aunt was probably the closest person that I've ever lost, I reflected a lot on the process of grief. And I thought a lot about how my older adults must feel with my grandmother. So my grandmother passed away just a month shy of her 98th birthday. She lived a very long life. Her husband was alive until he was 93. And she was just this incredible role model of successful aging. Somebody who was able to keep cognitive capacities, physical capacities in the realm of what she wanted for a very long time. And I was having a heart to heart with her one time, and I'm sure many of you have had similar conversations with loved ones that had certain she was going to be a centurion, and she turned to that. And to be somebody at I'm 34 years old, to have had this feeling of accumulated loss, I'm only starting to potentially scratch the surface of what she possibly mean and what all of our or so also like really have passed. Only imagine how many of my siblings or God forbid, like there's friends and family, like there's jokes around how our older adults are one of their social calls is going to funerals because they know much of a toll that would take on an individual's soul and their experience and some of their zest for life until I felt like some of the accumulated effects over a relatively short amount of time of experiencing a significant amount of loss. And and so I had one of our TAs, Rachel Moore, she's one of our lead faculty for pelvic. We were having conversations about this, and you feel like you're stuck in this loop of, oh my gosh, this person has left. And it's true, right? Where we are with individuals in that short amount of time where we're doing funeral preparations and all those types of things, but that grief weighs heavily on a person's soul and on a person's mind. And we don't really teach individuals how to deal with grief. And when it comes to older adults, we oftentimes think that this is such a normal part of the aging process that I don't think we ever truly hold space for individuals when they are dealing with grief. And so when I was reading a book called Breaking the Age Code, this really came front of mind. So we talk at an MMOA about the psychosocial considerations of working with older adults, about how it can be so great for us to put a heavy deadlift in their hand or get them getting up off the floor for the first time in a decade. And all of those things are really have the financial resources, the mental resources, or the skills in order to help with these big buckets that are truly just hemorrhaging. Um, then we're not really going to give them the best type of care. And when I was reading a book called Breaking the Age Code, it really came to mind for me about it, where when we look at mental health disorders, and she wrote a section in this book, her book on mental health. And she talked with our older adults is to give them anxiolytics and antidepressants without truly leaning into grief and leaning into talk therapies. And she she described in literature where many of our older adults may that they need in order to make it through their day because their grief is so heavy, and your grief doesn't just last for 2 weeks. And so I was reading, kind of thinking about all this and the weight of grief and the thoughts around grief and how this relates. Personally, this is relating to me. I started reading a book called The Collected Regrets of Clover. I think is helpful for the way that I'm approaching now or thinking about I'm working with, who are experiencing loss or who have disclosed to me that they have lost a lot of people that are close to them. And this book it's fiction. It is so beautiful. It talks about a woman who is a death doula who basically comes and supports individuals through the end of their life, similar to how a postpartum doula would help a new baby come into the world, or a pregnancy postpartum doula. They talk about how when we're thinking about grief, at first it's this large weight that is on their frame is that your grief is always carrying you, easier to carry with time. It never goes away, but we start to be able to function in some ways with it. I think that's um, in the not the non that can create this expression of apathy or a lack of engagement, which can sometimes create this space where it may be hard for individuals to engage with us in rehab. And so, um, sometimes being able to dig deep into some of those considerations and create resources for them can be one of the best things that we can do. And so in this book, she had this quote, and I read it on my Instagram a couple of weeks ago, but I'm going to read it to you now. And then we're going to finish off this podcast with a couple of things that I'm thinking about as a geriatric clinician to are influencing our people that we are working with that we cannot see, that are influencing who they are and how they show up in the world. And so in this book, this was literally the fifth page on pain, not just the physical pain of their body shutting down, which we see all the time in rehab, right? But the emotional pain of watching give someone the chance to be seen at their most vulnerable is much more healing than any words. And it was my honor to do that, to look them in the eye and acknowledge their hurt, to let it exist undiluted, even when the sadness was overwhelming. And so, to put this into the context of rehab, I think there's a couple of things that I think of as a clinician. And that physical vulnerability and emotional grief, they are challenging to navigate. And we want to recognize that not only are we working with individuals who have low physical reserve, but there's an emotional piece of recognizing the loss of physical capacities and the emotional load of the loss of people that love them and they love as they get older, right? So my dad is 67. He has lost his mom, his brother, his best friend, and another from school. And I don't like all these people that I planned my retirement with are no longer with me. And I don't want to go to the golf courses anymore. I don't want to engage in physical activity because the people that I wanted to engage in physical activity with are no longer there. And so diving deep into some of those conversations, we say at MMA, being truly curious, but not only physically curious about the things that drive individuals, but emotionally curious about maybe some of the things that are holding them back. And I think that can be a really, really wonderful way to get into some of the barriers and recognize that it's a little bit more complicated than them not wanting to engage in doing squats with us, right? And so that's kind of number one. Number two is it's heavy for us to be able to listen to things that are really sad, but we can have a very big role in trying to mend and heal some individuals who do not have somebody to talk to. Right? We have a loneliness epidemic in our older adult spaces, well, really all over our generations, but that is compounded. That loneliness is compounded when people that you are not lonely with have passed away. And so recognizing trying to create resources, whether that is resources within the community, like seniors associations or gyms where individuals can connect and have new kinships, especially in the face of loss when they are ready to, is one way for us to create having a person that you can refer that is a psychologist, a talk therapist, a psychiatrist too, but where the knee jerk reaction isn't just prescribing medications. And I am not anti medication, do not mishear me. But I think that the addition of, our conservative side, we talk about how we are not anti surgery, we are conservative management forward, dealing with really heavy emotions and maybe have never been taught how to deal with grief. I'm a parent who's trying to not hide, um, but appropriate the work that grief and grief processing with my 5-year-old, and I am acutely aware of trying to teach her skills to manage sad emotions. But so many older adults don't have those skills, and so it's important for us to recognize some of those resources. And so, where I'm going to challenge you all today is one to see if you can find a talk therapist in your area um, that you could have in your referral network when these conversations do come up. And inevitably, if you're working in geriatrics, the concept of grief and loss will come up. I recognize that in the United States and in Canada, one of the hardest things is finding someone who's in network or taking Medicare and finding somebody who does not have a super long wait list. I totally recognize that. It may require a little bit of digging deeper, and that can oftentimes be one of the biggest barriers for individuals seeking care through talk therapy, and why our primary care physicians are leaning into med management. But sometimes, the best thing we can do is try and find some providers, find individuals who work with on the regular, and try and create those bridges and those connections. Try and create those bridges and those connections when appropriate. All right. I hope you found that helpful. I kept it together pretty good, I think, considering things considered. If you are looking to get into some of our older courses for the summer, we have a couple of opportunities coming up. Our last opportunity in June is in Charlotte, North Carolina with Julie. That is June 22nd and 23rd. In July, we have 3 courses going. We have Virginia Beach, July 13th, 14th. Jeff Musgrave is up in Victor, New York, July 20th and 21st. And if you truly want the full experience of all of our MMOA faculty and staff, we have our MMOA Summit where Dustin and I are going to teach the course, but all of our teaching assistants and other lead faculty are going to be there. That is going to be in Littleton, Colorado, July 27th, 28th. That is going to be a super fun time if you are interested in hanging out with all of us and geeking out about adult care. Like that is the time to take MMOA Live. So if you have any other thoughts, questions, concerns, let me know. If you want to share some of your grief journey, I am all ears, because it has been quite the couple weeks that I know that I'm just at the front end of this journey, and I'm not going to shy away from it. And it's definitely given me some new perspective as a geriatric clinician. Even when I thought I kind of had done my research and I've been in a lot of experiences talking about grief, it is so different when you're experiencing it yourself. All right. Hope you all have a wonderful week. Signing off now.